the European migration crisis from Syria, if anyone knew anything about it in the United States up until last November, it was either the photos of the children washing up on, it was the humanitarian piece of it. And we, if anything, got criticized by outside groups, by advocates on this issue that we were taking refugees too slowly and that we should be taking more. And we were getting quite a bit of pressure from actually both sides of the aisle and across the political spectrum to take more. And what was interesting for me is all of that changed in November virtually overnight. And that was after the attacks in Paris. Until that point, people in the United States either weren't paying attention or just felt some humanitarian reason to care about the refugee crisis. But after the attacks in Paris, within a week, we had 30 governors come out in the United States and say, we will refuse to take refugees in our states, which is an extraordinary statement, one that they actually can't follow through with practically, because refugees are admitted by the federal government, and once they're in the United States, they are free to live wherever they would like. But overnight, it became a political hot-button issue here. And whereas refugee policy, even during the first years of the Syria crisis, has been largely driven on a bipartisan basis, that people from religious organizations across the spectrum, from the right, from the left, have supported the moral and humanitarian reasons for supporting refugees. And we do that not just with accepting some here, but we're the largest donor of humanitarian assistance to groups like UNHCR and others. Overnight, it became a political hot-button issue. And these governors started putting out these statements. Congress started acting, trying to act, to see if they could influence this debate. So whereas a week before we were taking heat for not accepting enough, we were in a position where we were fighting just for the 10,000 we wanted this year. And we are on track to bring in 10,000 Syrian refugees in this fiscal year because we've ramped up our efforts, but that is a drop in the bucket in terms of numbers. You're absolutely right. So what we've seen throughout this past few months, without getting specifics here in terms of politics, is a fear in the United States about what is happening in Europe. And I have a good example from a few weeks ago that I think is illustrative, that when this awful attack happened in Munich, which was tragic and terrible, US cable networks covered it nonstop for 4 hours as breaking news when there was really no news breaking after the initial attack, with taking no breaks and not focusing on anything else. The same day, there was a much larger attack in Afghanistan that did not even make it onto the news, any of the cable news. So it perpetrates this fear in the United States about what's happening in Europe. And like my colleagues have said, it brings migration and CT and terrorism into the same bucket in people's minds here, where you now have people contacting the State Department saying, is it safe to travel to Europe? Yeah. Which is extraordinary to me. So we have tried, as the State Department, against the backdrop of a very divisive political campaign, which we stay very, very far away from, to continue to do a few things. The first, to bring the refugees in that we can, and to keep fighting for the ability to do that, and to keep fighting in these states where governors have spoken out to saying we need communities where refugees are welcome, because while they can't prevent them from coming to their states, we're not going to send someone fleeing persecution to a state where a governor says you're not welcome. We're just not going to. It's not how we work here. So we're trying to do that, but we are also, and I think this could probably segue into the next part of our conversation, working increasingly with our European partners on things like information sharing, on intelligence sharing, on border security, on working with them to help as they are dealing with this crisis in their countries. And I think that's been something that's an ongoing effort, and I think we're trying to make even more progress on.